Well, greetings, everyone, and welcome to another installment of City Lights Live, the online edition of the City Lights events calendar. I am your host, Peter Maravellis. As always, we are beaming to you from the unceded ancestral homelands of the Ramaytush Ohlone peoples. It is always a privilege and an honor to do so. Tonight, City Lights celebrates one of its own. As many of you know, City Lights is a publisher as well as a bookstore. It is always a delight when we can celebrate the publication of one of our own titles. And we are thrilled to be launching the release of a new novel by Gabriela Alemán. She is someone we are huge fans of here at City Lights. Tonight's event is being co-sponsored by our friends over at the Center for the Art of Translation. They are a 501c nonprofit organization based in San Francisco, whose goal it is to champion the cause of international literature, making it more accessible to English-speaking audiences, to bring to light the unsung work of translators, and to create a forum for translators to discuss their craft. They founded the great literary translation journal Two Lines, which serves as the center's cornerstone, and the journal's spirit radiates through all of the center's work today. We will be posting links in the chat from which you can learn more about their good work. So tonight, we are celebrating the novel titled Smoke. Gabriela Alemán is a master storyteller, and Smoke is at once suspenseful, dreamlike, haunting, and philosophical, while fully engaging the reader from start to finish. It's a book we're very, very excited about here at City Lights, and think you will too. Gabriela Alemán is the author of 10 books, including the novel Poso Wells, which City Lights published in 2018, and the short story collection Family Album, which City Lights also published in 2022. An author of critical essays on literature and film, she is founding member of the publishing house El Fakir Editores, based in Ecuador. At Tulane University, she developed the Latin American Writers Series, a digital archive of contemporary Latin American literature, and she currently lives in Quito, Ecuador. Joining her tonight, we are greatly honored to have with us the translator of Smoke, Dick Cluster. He will be in conversation with Gabriela. Dick Cluster is respected by many in both the translation community and the literary world at large for his work. He is a writer and translator based in Oakland, California. His original work includes 3 novels and 2 books of history, most recently, The History of Havana, in collaboration with the translator Rafael Hernandez. Other Cuban writers he has translated include Ada Barr, Pedro de Jesus, and Abel Prieto. He translated Gabriela Alemán's 2 previous City Lights published titles. So please join us now in offering a warm welcome to Gabriela Alemán and Dick Cluster. It is such a pleasure to have you back with us once again. Welcome to City Lights.
Thank you, Peter. Let's see, just by way of introduction, before I have Gabriela start to read some pieces, the novel is set in Paraguay. It has a plot in the past and a plot in the present, and these plots gradually converge. The one aspect of it that's particularly topical today, perhaps for US readers, is that it is about the rise of the Paraguayan dictator Alfredo Stroessner, who ran the country with absolute powers for 35 years, and about the family, a family that becomes entangled, enabling and entangled with him. So maybe some of that will hit home. But saying that that's what it's about is like saying Moby Dick is a book about a sea voyage. It's also about family secrets, family intrigues, family relationships, immigrants to South America from Europe, inventors, including the inventor of the ballpoint pen, early experiments with sulfa drugs, including in a leper colony, the pursuit of birds, which are called in English rheas, R-H-E-A, although no one knows that word. We left them with the indigenous word nyandues, and they're like a wild relative of the ostrich. Violence against women in varying ways, the Guarani, the indigenous Guarani language and culture, the Chaco War between Bolivia and Paraguay in the 1930s, and more. But right now, I'm going to ask Gabriela to read for about 10 minutes 2 passages that will introduce the character through whose eyes we mostly see the present, and the character through whose eyes we see a lot of the past. So we'll start with the very beginning of the book.
Hello, good evening. I just wanted to start saying thank you to City Lights again. I'm so very delighted and happy to be in this beautiful and historic publishing house. And I'm also very grateful for 3 of my books to be in it. So I'd just like to thank Peter and Elaine, Stacy, everybody at City Lights. And it's great to be with Dick. We haven't seen each other in a long time. So I'm going to start reading from the first chapter of Smoke. While she waits, the woman observes the long, thin leaves stretching through the wrought iron fence in front of the house. Nothing else braves the rising tide of wind forcing its ways into cracks, dragging its tongue along the pavement and grasping at the bare branches of 3 trees that stand like tortured skeletons along the sidewalk. There's no one in the street. So empty, it's like she's the only one who's dared to defy a curfew. There's just the sky hanging like the belly of a she-donkey. She's seen one in the countryside when she was a girl and fought its fowl for its udder. She recognizes the exact color, though she's never known it to be painted on the sky of Asunción before. In a silk blouse and linen pants, she's unprepared for the weather. Only her hair, stacked like she used to wear it 20 years ago, offers any shelter from the wind. She leans on a cane gripped on her right hand. There is a suitcase at her feet. She's been pressing the doorbell next to the gate for several minutes. She tries to make out a silhouette through the windows of the house, but nothing moves except the curtains. While she's searching for shadows, a chipa vendor approaches. Something must catch this peddler's attention. The woman's reddened arms, the bent posture, the fine line of blood dripping towards her lip. Because she stops to say that the gate doesn't lock, and to go in, climb the stairs, and knock on the front door. Before she can react, the peddler, who's looking at her like she's some kind of imposter, begins to clap. Not one clap, but several, distinct, heavy, separated sounds made by enormous hands. Though the woman registers this, what's stronger is the memory it conjures. That's what unnerves her, the memory. Never since, in any other part of the world, has she encountered clapping employed as an improvised bell. She's so rattled that she can't manage to thank the chipa seller, who's already setting off. Instead, she opens the gate, leaves her suitcase just inside, and walks up the wide staircase. Ivy still covers the walls of the house. 2 enormous palm trees continue to preside over the garden, and a variety of creeping yuyos still spread their leafy stems along the ground. The disorder holds sway in her memory. She knocks on the door, but nothing happens. Time passes, sweat soaks through the front of her blouse, and her legs cramp up. So she sits down on the steps. She doesn't try to find an open window and wonders whether she made her arrival date clear. Leaning her back against a column, she remembers the kitchen door. She struggles to her feet with a shiver, the sweat cold on her chest, her bad leg dragging until she manages to straighten it and goes down the stairs. She takes up the suitcase, dragging it through the damp weeds. She climbs the other steps, tries the knob, finds the door locked. When she runs her hand across her face, it comes away spotted with blood. She's got nothing to clean herself up with, but that doesn't bother her. Catching sight of the hem of her pants caked with mud, she tilts her head so the drops from her nose won't fall on the doorsill, and remembers that Andrei used to keep a spare key under the mat. It's still there, coated in a thick, dark layer of mold. She pulls a nail file from her purse, cleans out the grooves, and inserts the key into the lock. It fits. With an effort, she makes it turn. Once inside, she can't find the light switch, so she moves forward blindly, sliding her hand along the surface of the wall, leaving her suitcase by the door. In the empty room, her cane echoes like a hob's leg. She makes her way through the kitchen and into the living room before finally locating a switch. The curtains are closed. When the light comes on, she sees hundreds of dust specks floating in the air. Even after she tugs open the heavy red velvet drapes, light barely filters in. She steps into the open hallway alongside the inner courtyard, which doesn't look at all like what she remembers. It's covered with a thin layer of gray, like a coating of fine mesh. Piled next to the Guayacan tree are cans of paint, brushes, and buckets of water. The big clock hanging on the wall is broken, stopped. She keeps going, opening the doors along the inner side of the hallway one by one. In a small room, a thin girl stands looking out the window. The girl doesn't even turn. The woman continues on, and 3 doors down, she finds a group of men sitting around the table. They look at her as if she's not there. But one of them, tall and heavy-set, stands up, takes hold of her arm, and asks what she's doing in the house. His tone is more disinterested than threatening. He gives off a pungent smell. She doesn't tell him much, but says she's looking for Pablo. The man points to a marble staircase worn from long use at the end of the hall. Without waiting, he goes back into the room and shuts the door behind him. The woman climbs the stairs, at each step raising first her right leg, then her left, and then her cane. When she reaches the top, she sees more closed doors facing the railing that overlooks the courtyard, all bathed in a pale light that filters through the clouds. She loses heart, but even so, she opens them one by one until she finds him at last. He doesn't raise his eyes from the table when she comes in. Pablo, the woman says. She takes a few steps, her cane echoing in the closed space. No response. The man is seated on a bench that has shirt sleeves rolled up, visibly concentrating. The woman moves forward until she's standing right behind him. Only when she peers over his shoulder to watch him ply his chisel on a sheet of copper does the man notice her. He isn't startled, just looks at her and pushes his bench backward. Gabriela. His tone up.
Hold it. Wait. Sorry, but that's what we were going to do, I think, so that then we can have time to get to Andrei.
Now there's 2 women says so. There was another one, a paragraph.
Got you. Okay, so that is Gabriela, as you see, who ushers in the story in the present, and we will talk about her. We're going to jump across the ocean and back in time, and we're going to hear about Andrei. Sorry, Gabriela.
Okay. So this is the beginning of the 2nd chapter, which is when the story goes to the past. Andrei is standing by La Cala on the Palermo waterfront, looking out to sea. It's early spring and a mild breeze is blowing through the city. Sometime past midday on a lazy afternoon. He sits down on the dock across from the sanctuary of Santa Rita, pulling a sheaf of tobacco leaves from his jacket pocket. The tobacco is a gift from a friend who brought it from a town of Malacatos in Ecuador, and Andrei has carried it across half of Europe. In his other pocket is an ashtray he bought in Venice for Viliana. When he raises it to the sun, the blue Murano glass shimmers. The rainbow image lingers in his eyes while he rolls and lights a cigar. His acquaintances in Palermo are few, and he's in no hurry to go anywhere. He has time on his hands and has chosen the perfect day on which to spend it. The cigar burns down and he rolls another, the leaves crumpling nicely in his hands. Smoking becomes a conscious and purposeful act. He's running out of matches, and the breeze blows this one out before the tobacco has fully caught. The rolled leaves break into halves that burn at different rates. Once the match goes out, his attention moves on, his mind going someplace else. What he's trying to do, what he finds himself doing, is to engrave certain recollections in his memory, to store up certain details of his life, the texture of dawn when it came through the skylight of his 7th floor garret in Zagreb, the light in his mother's bedroom when the last rays of evening set the orange curtains aflame, and in the distance, behind the fiery fabric, the Buda River made a mercury lake, with a tugboat forgetting to its way slowly across. He gets lost there, his head in the past, free, certainties seen as possibilities, nothing more. The pleasure is in finding something new, not this city, because he's been here before, walking its narrow alleyways on other visits, the Norman and Byzantine churches and palaces dazzling him then. On his way to the sea, he has stopped in Piazza Calza, where the Sultan once held court. No, it's not Palermo's beauty that affords him this sudden lightness. It's the voyage through memory. It's the sea bathed in gold that fills him with amazement at something he had never seen before. That, and knowing that his mother is dead. Closing her eyelids and leaving his palm unmoving there, the doctor uttered only a single word, aneurysm, her brain swimming in blood before it shut down forever. He can leave. He has no reason to stay. He is a captive, too, allows himself to be captivated by the desire to start over someplace else, to go someplace where nobody knows him or cares where he came from. He lets himself be caught up in this possibility. All he needs to do is follow that impulse and leave. He slips easily off the wharf down into the beach, which lies exposed by the low tide, his gaze lost. He sinks his feet into the sand and lets his willpower dissolve. Time is an abstract notion. Was that a century or 7 minutes that have passed? And he notes that a long tongue of the sea has surrounded him up to his calves, without a sound or warning, and this tongue is growing and fighting to pull him in. The waves are strong. It would be easy to follow them. It would even be pleasant. The water tugs at him from below, while the darkness above pushes him into it. He has the vague notion that someone is waiting for him to come back, but also that if he does so, he'll be returning to something already known. And he doesn't want to go back ever again in his life. The water, cold as a reptile's skin, continues to rise. He struggles towards what he thinks is the shore as quickly as the water will allow, and realizes he's holding the Murano ashtray in one of his hands. The waves crash against his thighs, and he starts to panic. He can't get out. He turns around and shouts, and as he does so, throws the square of glass into the void like a projectile, an offering, a sacrifice. If they let him go, he'll leave it all behind. But the voice that's shouting isn't his. As soon as he's done, he turns again and sees that the froth along the shore is just wetting the tips of his toes. He's shaken and just stands there. When finally he leaves the beach behind, his calm returns. He walks under a sliver of moon towards his pension in the district of Bayero.
Thank you. So one thing I notice is that these two people are going to guide us in a narration that's going to take place in Paraguay. And they are immigrants or visitors. Gabriela is a visitor who lived there a long time before. Andrei is going to be an immigrant, as are Ayala, the patriarch of the family he marries into, who was a Brit with a different name, as are other friends of his. Why, if you have any idea why, did you choose to show us Paraguay through immigrant eyes? Or sometimes we don't know why we did these things, but where did it lead you to do that? And why Paraguay at all?
I think it's better if I start with why Paraguay at all. When I was 17, I lived in Paraguay. It was the very end of Stroessner's dictatorship. I played professional basketball, and I played in this incredible team who also has a soccer team that's very well known called Olimpia, which if there are any soccer fans out there, that'll ring a bell, because Olimpia's won many Copa Americas. It's won tons of titles in South America, and it's a very well-known team. And they also had two basketball teams, a male and a female team, and there were championships. I got drafted into the female team. I was there right after I graduated from high school. And I discovered a country that I had no idea existed. It's become one of my favorite places in the world. It's still an enigma to me. And over the years, it's become a place that I think transformed me, changed me, turned me into the person I am. So I was very lucky to be there, but it was also a very strange place, because as Dick mentioned, Stroessner was in power for 35 years. Paraguay is one of the least known countries in South America, and I would venture in the world. It's a very big country, but its history has been very violent and unknown. It's smack at the center of Latin America. And one of its incredible characteristics, which has shaped the history of the country itself, is that one of its official languages is an indigenous language, which is Guarani. And that just makes it stand out in the whole concert of South America to have an indigenous language as an official language. When I got there, all of my friends spoke Guarani. They would switch to Spanish so I could understand. I lived there for 3 years, so I caught some words. I learned some constructions, which I've lost over the years. And when I started writing Smoke, came back slowly. But it's not only a language, but a worldview. It's a way of understanding the world through this language, which is constructed through metaphors, and which doesn't allow certain concepts like accumulation in terms of economy. So everything that has to do with money in terms of capitalism is spoken in Spanish, and that's led to another language that is also spoken in Paraguay, which is called Yopara, which is a mixture of Spanish and Portuguese, and which is mostly spoken in the cities and not in the countryside. So as I was telling you, I got to Paraguay. I lived there for 3 years. I started studying in university. I was studying philosophy there. I made some of the best friends I have in the world, and I kept in contact with them. I would go back every 5 years to Paraguay after I left. Stroessner fell 2 years after I left. And then in 2004, when I was living in Ecuador, one day turning on the TV to a news channel, I heard about this. This was in 2004. If you were around, I'm sure you heard about this. It was Centro Comercial, a mall that caught fire. The food court caught fire, and when the people started to try to escape because of all the smoke and the flames, the owner of this mall gave the order to the private guards to lock the doors. Not only the glass doors, but the metallic doors. And people were trying to push and get out. But that day, 400 people died. And when I heard about this, it was in Asunción. I started to get in contact. I tried to get in contact with my friends to see if they were there, if they had family there, if they had friends there, and then also I was listening to the explanation in the news, which was mostly CNN, just snippets, minutes, talking about the greed of the owner that had given the order to close these doors so people wouldn't leave without paying. And the first thing that came to my mind after having lived there under a dictatorship was that the owner of this place, I thought in my mind, had to be well connected to the ruling party, because he knew there was going to be an immunity to what he did. And 20 years after, no, he never went to jail. The only person who went to jail was one of the guards who stayed in jail for 2 years. And when he proved that it was an order he followed, he was let out. And these 400 people have never received justice. And when I heard about this, as I was telling you, I tried to get in contact with friends of mine. And finally, like a week afterwards, I got in contact with one of my friends who worked in a high school, and she was a psychologist. And she told me that 2 of the students had committed suicide because some of their family members had been in there, and they just couldn't deal with the idea that they were burned alive or they were suffocated. So after I learned about this, and I started to feel that I needed to talk about, to write about Paraguay, because by this time I'd been gone from Paraguay a long time. Every time I found a book about the history of Paraguay, I bought it in different places of the world. I accumulated articles, magazines, about Stroessner, about the Jesuits who founded these utopian colonies in the Chaco of Paraguay. and that were later thrown out of the country. So that when this happened in 2004, the Iqua Bolaño fire, I decided to sit down and start to write. And that led to 12 years of writing because I found out that I had to fill in gaps, that people didn't know much about Paraguay. And if I wanted to explain what had happened in that fire, I had to go back to Stroessner, and I had to go back to the dictatorship, and I had to talk about how self-censure works, how 35 years of terror affect a population, and also to try to understand it myself, because as I was telling you, I got there at the very end, and by the end, the persecutions, the corruption weren't as strong as at the beginning. So as I was doing this, I also realized around year, I don't know, year 8, that Guarani had to be central to the story, because it's a country where 95, 98% of the population speak Guarani. And it had to be there. It had to be very present. And I also understood after all those years that to explain Guarani and to explain Paraguay to someone who isn't from Paraguay, I needed to explain the codes that go along with an indigenous language acting as an official language. I had to explain a country that had shut down in the 19th century when there was another dictator, Gaspar Rodriguez de Francia, and that was the time that Guarani became the main language of Paraguay. Then I had to go back and talk about La Guerra de la Triple Alianza, was this horrible war that in the 19th century, Argentina, Brazil, and Uruguay fought Paraguay, and 90% of the male population was wiped out completely. And Paraguay had to reconstruct itself. So I had to fill all of this in because that's the only way you can understand Paraguay in some ways. But I also didn't want it to make it a history book. I didn't want to fill it with information that wouldn't let the story build and have these different protagonists and antagonists evolve around 80 years where the story takes place. So when I realized this, I realized that I needed to have people in the past and the present who weren't from Paraguay, who were translating the country and the language and the situations to the reader. Sort of what you do, they translate from one language to the other. This was someone who was translating an understanding of the world to another different understanding of the world. So that's when I understood that I needed to have Andrei in the past, and this figure of this woman who began being called Claudia, and eventually she was called Gabriela. This was also the time when there was a lot of autofiction starting to become popular in Western literature. And I thought, why not put my name and give this name to the woman who used to live in Paraguay. So that's a little how I got there. And then the other thing that had to do with the historical context of where I wanted to mirror the past with the present was that Andrei leaves Europe in the 30s when things started to become clear that the National Socialists were starting to gain power in Germany, that Mussolini was gaining also traction in Italy, and that people were starting to see if they could leave the country, where they would go. And if you remember 2014, 2015, where it was like the height of those migrant boats that started to capsize in the Mediterranean. So that was the mirror of trying to set, from the historical point of view, which is something that goes along the whole book, is how the past is always present in the now, right? How we can't forget that the construction of the present, which seems so solid, is a construction that is not distant, that can crumble at any moment. So, and that has to do with something of what is happening now, right, in the world, but was already happening in 2014, 15 when I was starting to edit the book, because I finally finished it in 2016. I started 2004 and finished it in 2016.
Okay, thank you. Why don't we then segue from there to the part where someone does explain Guarani to someone else, where Juan Ayala is explaining it to Andrei. And this is on page, let's start on page 178. I'm sorry, 128. So the characters have been off trying to take advantage of a lull in the war to go after these nyandues, these ostrich-like birds, and they've captured a bunch of them. And there's a little kind of idyllic lull here where they're sitting around camping by the riverbank. And Andrei is hearing all these Paraguayans speak in Guarani, and he wants to understand. So you want to read from They Talk on top of 128?
I think you told me to start reading, and most of the birds are females.
We could do that if we.
Okay, that's what I have.
All right, let's do that.
Okay, most of the birds are females. The men have left the male birds protecting the nest so as to avoid any resistance. The mud has made animals and men equally clumsy. Before the assault, they decided that 2 males would be enough. The 15 captured birds are now tied by the legs. Andrei keeps close watch on the 3 giant, opaque eggs they have taken. These were the rejected ones, the ones that weren't inside any nest. The men eat fish on the riverbank. They are gathered together like a band of large birds themselves. They talk slowly in front of the fire that keeps the mosquitoes at bay. They talk, and there are phrases Andrei doesn't understand, but the modulations of their voices are no longer foreign to him. Some words even have meaning now. Ka'ahe'e, Panambi, Uvotu, Harai, Kwarahu, Pona, Shera'a. Explain it to me. What? What they're speaking. How do you say Guarani? Ava Nye'e, which means the way people speak. You know how they say Spanish? Kara'i Nye'e, the language of the master. Andrei looks at the youths who have come with them. Some are dangling their naked feet in the water. When they pull their feet out, he realizes how big and wide they are and how they use them. While their hands are occupied with the food, spread on a palm leaf, they pick up chips of wood between their big toes and the next ones and toss the chips in the fire. Andrei understands, watching them, that he's been served his meal on a separate leaf and that Juan, to keep him company, has taken some of the communal plate so as to sit by him, but the others all eat together. Nye'e means language and word and to speak and also tongue. And how do you know which it means when? Juan looks at him, taken aback, because you know, he thinks, though he doesn't say it out loud. When you talk, you know what you mean. It's part of the story. How to explain this to Andrei? Andrei is like his father in wanting to understand things in isolation. He hesitates before going on. You can't leave anything out. I'm not following you, Juan. If you want to understand the word, you have to know its other meanings and see the connection that allows it to form part of the whole. Now Andrei is taken aback. Putu means breathing, breath, blow, atmosphere, air, vapor, soul, spirit, and darkness. To eat or to drink. The word for resting is putu. Put the words together. Don't leave anything out. The food of the soul, to rest. To rest, you have to drink darkness. Air is the food of rest. A big smile forms on Juan's lip. Do you see? How would you encourage someone? What? To keep going, not to give up. Yahapu, which means foot. Keep on walking. Ava is people, Andrei asks. Yes, but another word for people is ivipora. Ivu, land, soil, south, world. Bora, inhabitant. Votu, mountain. Tu, pile. It's like putting a jigsaw puzzle together, Andrei says. Papa says that as long as Guarani doesn't disappear, they won't be able to do away with us. Silence falls, and Juan heads off towards his friends. Andrei would like to follow, but he doesn't.
So this idyll here is broken up by a sudden approach of airplanes, which begin to drop bombs on them. They had thought they were safe in a lull in the fighting, but they're mistaken for troops, or it's hard to say. And suddenly the boat is sinking, the birds are being killed, and Andrei and several of the others are wounded. And I want to pick up there to segue to one of the other things that the book is about. So if you could read on page 131, I knew what was awaiting us.
Sure. I knew what was awaiting us, the open wounds, the maggots, and the next day, under the sun and the feet of those apocalyptic flies, I heard them talking, heard the horrible buzzing of the words that came out of their mouths while I held my leg, that under the blanket of those filthy feet was hot. My hand, touching the wound, felt warm, throbbing. My head was spinning. Palmajuk. I wasn't thinking, just jumping from one thing to another. And all that pent-up longing. I don't know what came over me, but I started to scream Biliana's name. I couldn't stop. Biliana, 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 like a madman, that night swallowing my breath. And then suddenly the sound of the motor, drowning my words. It's a truck in the middle of nowhere, kilometers from the nearest outpost. The headlights approach, throwing their fan-shaped beams on the dust the truck kicks up ahead of it. The lights blinding, the dust suffocating, the sound of the motor monotonous and steady, then light pouring out the sides as the man gets out of the vehicle and stands in front of them. His silhouette is huge. Someone grabs a machete and you can hear a click. Drop that or I'll blow you all to hell. Lieutenant, says Juan, standing up. Yes, Ayala, and I'm not fucking around. Put that man, he points at Andrei, in the truck. They're putting him in the back of the truck when Stroessner insists Andrei has to sit in front next to him. He grabs a bottle of aguardiente and sticks it in Andrei's mouth. He makes him swallow before sprinkling the rest on his wound. And then he puts his foot on the gas.
So this is one of several introductions of Stroessner when he's still a lieutenant in the Chaco War that we have. This one seemed particularly evocative to me of the figure that he strikes. I'm curious what reactions you've had from like South American readers to the figure of Stroessner in the book and the central role of his dictatorship and the entanglement of the family, because this entanglement begins right here. Stroessner has rescued Andrei because he needs him for something, and this will go on for generations. So I'm curious what reactions South American readers had to it, and I'm curious how you feel about it, if at all, in relation to US reality now or the reality of creeping authoritarianism elsewhere in the globe.
What happened is that when Humo or Smoke was published in Latin America, I was lucky enough that it was published in Paraguay, in Bolivia, in Colombia, in Mexico, in Argentina. And the first place it came out was in Colombia, and it came out in 2017 when they had just gone through a long process of drawing up a peace treaty between different factions in Colombian life. And there were, I wouldn't say tons of books, but a lot of books that came out after what was termed the post-conflict. And it was also the time this was going on in Central America. So some of the reviews that came out put Smoke in that context of post-conflict. And I thought it was very interesting because when I was writing the book, I was very conscious of not trying to tell the story of Stroessner. I don't know if you know, but in the boom era with Garcia Marquez and Mario Vargas Llosa and Carlos Fuentes and Roa Bastos, who was the great Paraguayan writer, they had sat down at some point and decided that each one of them was going to write the great dictator novel of their country.
Oh, didn't know that.
So Roa Bastos wrote an incredible novel called I the Supreme, which is about the dictatorship of Gaspar Rodriguez de Francia, which was this 19th century dictator in Paraguay. And Garcia Marquez wrote about a dictator in Colombia and Mario Vargas Llosa in Peru and so forth. So what I wanted to do in Smoke so many years later was to write about the effects of a dictatorship on a people, on a country. What happens after a dictatorship has finished is long gone, and the effects of what I mentioned before, of self-censorship, of just how you go through life because you don't want to ruffle feathers, you don't want to get be too in plain sight of authorities, you don't want to say the wrong things and become a target. And when I lived in Paraguay, my friends had been born under the dictatorship. There had already been 3 generations of Paraguayans by the time that I got there that have been living and trying to survive under Stroessner control. So that there have been ways of I don't know, swirling around, because you have to survive 35 years. People are born, people fall in love, people die, people get jobs, people lose jobs. So to give you an example, there was the place where I lived that I would walk to university every day. There was a park and there was a bookstore in this park. And I would see, like at the beginning when I didn't know the booksellers, I would see that every so often one of the booksellers would go under the table and come out with a brown bag and hand it to someone, and they would pay them. I lived there for 3 years, so by the first year, I had gotten to know the booksellers. I'd become friends. They knew that I was studying there, that I was playing in Olympia. So there was a certain camaraderie, of friendship. So at some point, I asked them, what's going on here? And they would tell me that they had someone who would buy books in Argentina, that at that time was a democracy, and they would send them to Paraguay, and they would, certain readers would buy them, and it would be under the table. So you find ways of surviving in a dictatorship, so everything isn't oppressive all the time. So that's what I tried to incorporate into Smoke. I tried to think of what happens when this lieutenant starts to gain power. It seems at the beginning, as I was telling you, the history of Paraguay has been very violent since the 19th century. And there's some point in the novel where I have a person that recites the years of the different presidents of Paraguay. And there's some moments where he recites the same number over and over again. And that was when there were topplings, when there were coups. So every time there was a big figure after Gaspar Rodriguez de Francia, there would be a coup and another person would come into power. So at the beginning of Stroessner's dictatorship, people didn't expect him to gain so much power in so little time. He was very smart in that he took over all the ministries, that he took out the heads of the military that weren't loyal to him. He took out everybody that wasn't absolutely loyal to him. You were mentioning how this resounds in the world today, and I think it resounds way too strongly.
Yeah.
So Stroessner did this, and at some point, he had control over all of Paraguay. He had spies telling on their neighbors, tattletaling. And then all of a sudden, this thing became a monster. And for 35 years, he controlled it. And then he started to lose that control because of different factors. So So I was interested in putting these snippets, these small paragraphs where I would just show the silhouette of Stroessner gaining power, but he wasn't the main focus. The main focus was Andrei and his family, how he was affected by this power growing around him, this shadow that was overshadowing everybody's lives, and then how that affected. Ultimately, I don't want to give it away, so you read the novel, but how that affected the brothers that are the sons of Andrei, which would be the third generation in this story. And
one
also,
of whom is one of whom is the Pablo that you heard about when Gabriela first enters the house.
So so that was what I wanted to do. I also didn't want to give that much information. You were mentioning about the creator of the ballpoint pen, who I discovered was from Yugoslavia. At that point, it existed, and wound up at some point meeting the president of Argentina, and living in Buenos Aires. So I just found all these connections very interesting because, like I was saying, I was trying to put these mirrors of migration all over the place, because South America and the world at large is a place of migrations, of people coming and going, of cultures touching and languages mingling, and something new appearing, and creating the possibility of different futures. So that's what I did with the figure of Stroessner. I wanted to give him importance because he was such an important figure, but he wasn't the center of it. He was like a satellite that was going around, and maybe Andrei and his family was the center of it, was the sun in some ways.
Great, thank you. I see that we have a bunch of questions in the chat, so maybe we should turn to them now. Peter, are you there to do that?
Yes, indeed. So we have City Lights publisher Elaine Katzenberger in the room, and making reference to Gabriela's statement earlier. She says, wow, Gabriela, what a complete and wonderful answer to that question. And as its publisher, I can tell you that this tells you everything you need to know about how complex, complete, layered, and fantastic this novel is, and yet very readable, almost a whodunit. Let's see. Then we have Jeff says, this is directed at Dick. Can you tell us some of the translation challenges in this project? Can you say what resonates for you with respect to our U.S. reality today?
Well, so I don't think what resonates with respect to the U.S. reality today is just what Gabriela has been describing, and especially the sort of way that someone can be seeking to develop his, stormtroopers and his other ways of exerting power in ways that some people expected him to do, but millions of people voted for him and didn't expect him to do. And all of that stuff resonates. And also the stuff about the enabling, so Andrei does this favor for Stroessner, and it has all these consequences. And there were all these people who thought that they could play Trump, and they couldn't. So in a lot of those ways, it resonated. But the translation challenges were different. The translation challenges were about I'll mention three things, I think. One is that I've never been to Paraguay. I've translated Gabriela before with stories set in Ecuador, which is not a place that I'm steeped in like Cuba, but it is a place that I have been and have some understanding of. I didn't know any Guarani. So there's a lot of cultural stuff that I had to learn, read about, ask Gabriela about, make mistakes and have Gabriela point them out to me, many things like that about translating from a culture that I don't know nearly as well as other cultures that I've translated from. But then there are also translation issues that are just about the language. So which always happens, but an interesting thing, so that first passage you had, where the woman is there and she does this and she does that and she does this and she does that. And the word she appears in those pages, that chapter or half a chapter, like 100-something times. I counted them. The Spanish word ella, the subject pronoun she, appears 5 times. So that's because in Spanish, you don't need to use subject pronouns. The verb ending tells you not the gender, but it tells you everything else about about whose it is, first person, second person, third person. So you don't need those. So wow, I mean, is that going to make it incredibly boring to say she over again? I tried to avoid it when I could, but on the other hand, sometimes this presents opportunities, so that I hope that the whole passage is kind of dreamy and like you're in a spell. So I hope that the repetition of she gives it an incantatory, if that's a word, a tone of incantation that does something that English allows us to do. So there's a couple examples.
Yeah. Nancy says, it is so interesting that the indigenous language is official in Paraguay. Could you tell us a bit about the indigenous culture there?
That, Gabriela, is for you.
Yeah. Well, there's many indigenous groups, not only Guaranis in Paraguay. There's the Ayorero. At some point in the novel, I mentioned them all because when European migration came into Paraguay, they took the land like if nobody had lived there before. And also, it's. I was telling you that Paraguay is fascinating amongst many things because of its history. And I don't know if you know, I wrote a small book about this also. In the 19th century, Friedrich Nietzsche's sister, with her husband, traveled to Paraguay, and they attempted to found a new Germany in Paraguay, in indigenous land, in Ayorero land. 13 families from Germany traveled there. They didn't do very well there. But it's a fascinating read because I found all the letters that Elisabeth Nietzsche had written to Friedrich Nietzsche, inviting him to go to Paraguay. And him saying that he had no interest in hers and her husband's anti-Semitic project because it was the idea of refounding Germany outside of Jewish influences. So the history of indigenous groups in Paraguay is long, very troubled, because they've been ousted from their lands. They've been chased from their lands because of soya cultivations, and also because of ranches that are occupied their lands. But they're still resisting there. Their languages are still resisting. There's some groups who have no contact with Western culture still, mostly in the frontier near Brazil. And like in all groups that are minorities, it's difficult. Even though Guarani is the official language, it's in many ways the groups, the indigenous groups are in the periphery. They're not central, even though the language is very central. So it's a complicated situation. That's why it's also so fascinating. And because it's an official language, it's also, there is a strong presence of the Guarani culture. Not necessarily only in indigenous groups, but in the mestizo population. So I encourage you to look up more information because it's very intriguing, and it's mostly a history of resistance.
And that was another translation issue, of course. What Gabriela chose, not to translate the Guarani, even though for Colombian readers, they wouldn't know it, but it's so central that it needs to be there. So the question is, the translation question this always poses is, to what extent has she given readers a little help in understanding what this means by by context or by dialogue or by what the word comes before or after. Many of them are interjections that get dropped into conversations. And my challenge is how to recreate that, how to find usually other ways of giving that same degree of help to the reader.
So we've got Stacy Lewis, who's the director of publicity at City Lights, in the chat, and she says, "Can Gabriela or Dick show or hold up the beautiful book so we can see it all?" Look at that cover! Wow. Actually, Dick, I'm gonna spotlight it for everyone. There we go. I think now all of you can see it. Yeah, lovely cover.
Okay, there you go. Smoke.
So let's see. Barbara asks, is there any chance this fabulous presentation is being recorded? Yes, it's going to be on our YouTube channel eventually. Let's see. Ambra asks, Gabriela, how do you feel the novel has changed in translation? What's something that stands out to you about the experience of reading a translation of your own book?
What happened is that we don't have a postal service anymore in Ecuador. So I don't have the book, and I haven't read the last galleys. I just printed the pages that Dick wanted me to read today. Stacy sent me a PDF. So I haven't read the whole book through. I could mention other of Dick's translations of Poso and Family Album that also came out in City Lights. It's a very out-of-body experience because while I'm reading, I'm hearing myself in Spanish, but in a different language, hearing myself in interpretation of that language. As I was reading right now, I was tempted to change some words because I had the Spanish in my head while I was reading them. But it's a new book. That's what I love about translation. I love to read books in translation because finally the author of the translation is a co-author of the book. It becomes a different book. And like Dick was talking about right now, these 5 ellas in Spanish turn into 100 she's in English. So it has to be a different book. It has to be a different feel to it. And the challenge of the translator is to keep something of the original in there still, some gusto of it. And I think from what I've read that it works very well.
Yeah, thank you.
I think we have time for one more. Dylan says, I love this book so much, Gabriela, and I appreciate this feeling of the past being always with us, the present about to crumble into the past. I was curious, would you be able to say a little bit about how the Guarani language or culture treats the past? Was that a perspective that influenced your views of past versus present in writing?
Well, something that happened to me while I was writing, I had a different title almost till the very end of the book. It was almost till when it was going to be published in Spanish in year 12 that I changed it, and it turned into Smoke because I think it works very well because of the smoke of the smoke that of the past that is a veil, the smoke of war. But the actual title was Amoite. And Amoite is one of those untranslatable words which means nostalgia for the future. I think it's beautiful. It's a word that has a lot to do with longing, with expecting for something to get better, even though the creations of the past and the present are leading to a future that isn't hopeful, but could be, because there's a nostalgia in there. There's a seed where things could turn and make it hopeful. So in Guarani, from what I gathered, what I studied, I read a lot of treatises of grammar. There's this incredible author who was a Jesuit priest who got to Paraguay in the 1950s, Bartolomé Meliá, who has this incredible book that talks about the structure of the language and the philosophy of the language. And I read that over and over again. And I was so lucky that when I went to Paraguay to present the novel, he presented it. He was there at the book launching. And his book is called La Invención del Guaraní, the invention of Guarani. And as I was saying, it's a very metaphorical language. And I think it feeds on this idea of circularity of time, which is something that was always very present in the novel. If you get to the end of it, you see how the past and the present unite, they merge, and they're creating this possible future. So I didn't get to publish it with Amoite, which also has this, in Spanish, it has the sound of amor, which is love. So I thought it would work. The publishers convinced me that smoke might work better. They twisted my arm. I let them. But all the time while I was writing, I was thinking of this idea of longing of a future, of not only of longing of the past, and also if you think of it, the way the future is constructed is what we do in the past. What the decisions we've taken in the past construct the future. So this longing of the future has a lot to do with time and the past and the present also.
Dick, do you have any parting thoughts?
Well, only so an old friend and Venceremos Brigade comrade from Cuba in 1970, American, wrote me and asked could I send him a signed copy of the book, and I was trying to figure out what to say, and what I said was for times past, for times present, and for a different future, or something like that. I can't remember. So it's interesting that I was channeling that feeling that Gabriela just described.
Well, I'd just like to thank everyone who was here tonight, and I'd like to thank Dick for his questions, Peter, Stacy, Elaine again. It's always lovely to know that City Lights is my home, to feel that I'm part of such a long and wonderful history of resistance and great literature and translation, and the possibility of reading each other in different languages, but in English. So thank you again for being here tonight and for publishing Smoke.
And I thank City Lights also very, very much. It's such a trip to have, grown up to be published by City Lights. And thank Gabriela for her writing, and which I've been following since we met by accident at the Havana Book Fair. So thank you.
Well, we love the two of you as well. And Gabriela, congratulations on this wonderful new novel and for allowing City Lights to publish it. And Dick, thank you for the beautiful job of translation and also for doing the honors tonight in such a lovely way. I'd also like to thank our sponsors at the Center for the Art of Translation for all that they do and for supporting tonight's event. Finally, I'd like to thank all of you in the audience for joining us. If you enjoyed tonight's event, Dick Cluster will be doing an in-person talk on Smoke, not with Gabriela, but he's going to be in conversation with Bay Area translator Catherine Silver. And it's going to be at Cleo's Books on Monday, November the 3rd at 7 p.m. And Cleo's is at 353 Grand Avenue near Lake Merritt. It's over in Oakland. If you haven't checked it out, it is really a wonderful, wonderful space and bookstore, and it's actually beyond a bookstore. It's really something else. You should experience it. We have posted links in the chat function of your Zoom dashboard, of which you may purchase copies of Smoke and other titles by Gabriela. We have also posted the links to Dick's website, as well as the Center for the Art of Translation, so you can learn about their good work. And of course, if you're in the hood, you may also purchase the books directly from our brick and mortar. Come on down, pay us a visit. We're located in San Francisco's historic North Beach district. We're open 7 days a week from 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. every day. And of course, today's event has been made possible by support from the City Lights Foundation, fostering an active engagement with books and literary culture through our public events, our publishing program, our educational outreach, and all of it is dedicated to sustaining a vibrant community of readers, writers, and independent thinkers. So long, everyone. Take care. Stay strong. Be kind to each other. We hope to see you all again soon.
Okay, Gabriela, thanks so much for in the midst of everything.
All
It was
right.
great
Be
to
in
see you.
touch.
Good
Thanks,
night.
Peter.
All right.
Okay,
Take care.
bye.
Bye-bye.
Good conversation. Bye.
A pleasure.
Bye.